Welcome to this one-on-one webinar that we have for escrow, understanding digital money movement through escrow accounts. And we have two very accomplished personalities in the space who can actually, guide us through a lot of these questions that we might have in mind in terms of what is an escrow, what is this instrument, and how does it play a important role in money movement, especially with the changing regulations, changing guidelines, this instrument becomes super important. So we have with us Althea Trinidad, who heads operations for Universal Trustees. And Universal Trustees is a very renowned trusteeship company. And she will bring to us the point of view of how a trustee plays a super important role in escrow as an instrument. We'll talk a lot more about how that role is also evolving. So we're looking forward to that again. Welcome to the webinar. We also have Tushar, who is the head of legal for Cashfree payments and brings in a wealth of legal compliance, regulatory leadership and experience, and will bring the point of view of what this means from a legal and an implementation standpoint. And I'm Aditi. I head new initiatives for cash-free payments. And I'm looking forward to this discussion and adding on to, the product, tech, and sort of business aspect of what kind of use cases do we see today for escrow as a service and for escrow as an instrument. And what is the role that, fintechs and TSPs such as us can play in this landscape, and what do we bring in for platforms that are looking for escrow services. So welcome all of you again. We'll dive right in and we'll try to keep this, as conversational as possible and also conversational with the attendees. My request is, guys, if you have questions, do put in the chat and we'll try to take questions as we go. We'll try to answer these questions, and in some cases, these might be opinions or even, thoughts. We'd be happy to share those as well. So let's get started. I think, Althea, we'll get started with you because I think that's a question that we hear quite a lot when we Cashfree, interact with platforms and fintechs and startups, right, that come to us on escrow as a service, right? What is, let's go start with trustee 101, right? Who is a trustee, right? What is the day-to-day operations role that a trustee plays today from an escrow lens? So we'd love to hear from you on that.
Hi, Aditi. Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here and thank you for inviting us. So to answer Aditi's question, we are a corporate trustee service provider. So a trustee is basically an independent party. Now, as you know, the purpose of an escrow account is the money is pooled in. Maybe there are some assets that are pooled in, securities that are kept into this account, which does not belong to the company. It's an outsider's money. So what happens is, as a trustee, we are an independent party. We monitor the accounts, the outflows from the accounts, whether it goes to the correct parties or no. So this is the basic role of a trustee. The basic foundation for, of course, all this monitoring would be the agreements that are entered into with the clients and, say, for example, Cashfree for this particular instance. So this is, in short, what a trustee does. Yeah.
Great. Althea, thank you so much. I think that really helps in understanding also the fact that trustee basically plays the role of an escrow agent. There's maybe I'll also ask you to clarify that, because there are fintechs that come to us and, is a trustee and an escrow agent two different entities, right? So from a definition standpoint, if you could also kind of add on to that piece as well, trustee is equal to escrow agent, or is trustee a category of escrow agent? If you could help us clarify that as well.
So the basic difference between a trustee and an escrow agent is, as a trustee, we hold the security that has been created in our favor. So, for example, if you've lent some financing to a company, then the mortgage or security is created in favor of the trustee. Compliances on ROC, CERSI, etc., is done to an extent by us. But as an escrow agent, what happens is there is only a monitoring done of the inflows and outflows, or rather only the outflows from a particular account. Or it could be just maybe holding the security, not exactly creating security. So even if you want to just keep some receipts with me or some documents with me, we will just hold it with us. So that is the basic purpose of an escrow agent. And everything is bound by what is entered into between you and the clients.
Got it. So then is a trustee kind of a superset? Trust also plays the role of an escrow agent. Is that a correct way to put it?
Yeah, so a trustee can play the role of an escrow agent, but an escrow agent cannot play the role of a trustee.
Great, great. Well put. I think that really helps clarify this for folks who, sometimes have this confusion between what is an escrow agent, what is a trustee, right? So thanks for the clarification, Althea. Now talking about escrow as an instrument itself, right? And it has always existed. Escrow is not a new concept from an account standpoint, but it has become super important, I would say, in the last couple of years. So Tushar, maybe, would love to get your view on this. If you can help us understand what exactly is an escrow and very importantly, how is it different from a current account as an instrument and a note instrument, right? Especially with the evolving landscape, I think this question becomes super important. Folks who are exploring these instruments.
Thank you, Aditi. I think there's some echo. Anyways, I hope I'm audible clearly, right?
Yeah, I think there was an echo, but now it sounds fine.
Perfect. So escrow, if you'll take the typical meaning of escrow is nothing but a instrument or a mechanism under which a good or service or money is kept with an independent third party, so that the money or that good flows on the basis of instruction or the agreement between two parties. Now, to bring it forward, and in today's landscape, especially considering the discussion we are having, escrow is an account which is monitored or managed by a third party, and two parties, typically a buyer or a seller or a payee and a beneficiary, they don't have 100% trust amongst each other, right? They want to secure, the payer wants to secure that if ABC happens, then the money should go ahead to the beneficiary. If doesn't happen, it should come back to me. And similarly, the buyer wants to secure his or her interest as well, right? So escrow becomes the account where the payer puts in money, of course, either due to lack of trust or a systemic issue. And then, basis the agreement between both the parties, that is beneficiary and payer, the fund will be released by a third party who's managing that escrow, right? So this is typically what an escrow is, right? Now coming to the second part of your query, where you wanted to throw some light on what is the difference between an escrow and a nodal, or escrow or a current account, right? So let me pick first current account first. So current account, I'm sure need not need any introduction. Current account is a basic account which is required for your business operations, unlike a saving account, right? It does not have a third party control mechanism. Only one party runs and manages the account, and it works on that party's discretion. On the other hand, nodal account has also evolved over a period of time. Today, what we see as a nodal account is framed under 2009 regulations issued by Reserve Bank of India. And nodal account, as we see, is sunsetting, right? So nodal account is typically an account where funds are pooled in by intermediaries, right? You need not be a buyer or seller, right? You need to have an intermediary who is pooling the fund of a seller, uh, and who's receiving the fund from the buyer, right? So that is typically a nodal account. But we are not certain what will be the future of nodal account. So that's something to wait and watch.
Thanks a lot, Tushar. I think that really makes the definition very, very clear, right? And add on to it from a TSP point of view, right? So we've talked about what is the role of a trust, we talked about what is the role of the bank and the instrument escrow. But like we said, escrow is not a new instrument, but there are new things happening. What are the new things? It's how to make the process, any movement simpler, right? Through TSPs, for example, Cashfree being such a TSP, right? Let's take an example. If we talk about a supply chain financing escrow, right? The escrow account itself, of course, will main account in a bank, right? And then there will be parties involved, be let's say the lender, and in some cases it could also be borrower, and so on and so forth, right? But essentially, what role can the TSP play? The TSP can provide a layer on top of this that can help money movement simpler, that can make reconciliation simpler. So let's say you need a ledger on top of the escrow, right, to be able to track the movement of money. You want additional tools in terms of, makeup, right, within ecosystem. So those are the kind of things that TSPs bring in, and they make the life easier both in terms of onboarding process as well as sort of the money movement in an escrow, right? So essentially, that's what is also from a product standpoint that's new and heating up in this, that money movement will be compliant, but get the same kind of experience that you get today with say payments service providers, right? But in a tier model, right? So that's sort of just a point of view from a TSP product standpoint, right? And also, since we have a bunch of folks joined in, I think we do have a interesting poll questions as well. Get on the nerve of what people are thinking escrows. So if I may request the team to pop up the poll question. Thanks, guys. So then moving on to going a little deeper again in terms of understanding operations in an escrow, right? So Althea, right, you mentioned at a high level what is the trustee role, right? But then digging a little bit deeper, right? Talk about is typically having two kinds of roles, having a monitoring role and having an operating role, right? If you could help us understand a little bit more about what monitoring role versus an operating role, and what use cases typically do you see for a monitoring kind of role versus an operating kind of role? Would get your insights on that.
So,
Yeah.
so basically, as an escrow agent, there are two types of services that we offer. One is a monitoring service, and one is operating services. Now, under the monitoring role, what happens is, again, there are two aspects. One is a pre-settlement and a post-settlement arrangement. Now, under a pre-settlement arrangement, as the term suggests, all these checks are done before the amount is moved out of the account. So basically, if there are any prerequisite conditions that are to be stipulated and completed, those have to be in place. Those are verified by us, and then the amount is, it is conveyed to the checker, and the account is debited from that amount is debited from that account. For post settlement arrangements is when we normally do it after the amounts have moved out from the account. We do it on a random sampling basis because probably the volume is very huge and it is not possible to verify each and every transaction. And this is also done maybe on a monthly basis, quarterly basis. It depends upon what arrangement is entered into. Now, normally, who goes in for a monitoring arrangement is mostly for instant settlement and fintechs that are providing 24/7 services, payouts, payment aggregators, payment gateways, TSPs. So that takes care of the monitoring arrangement. Now, on an operating front is where we are the checkers. So the makers to the payments are uploaded, and then we just check that the transactions are in place, and then the account is debited to that extent. So the bank would act on our instructions. Now, normally real estate transactions, SPVs, auctions, rent-related services are the arrangements that would prefer an operating role from our end.
Got it, got it, got it. Understood. And I'm assuming again, the making process itself can be something that you can do manually, as well as some of it can be made more seamless, let's say by working with platform TSPs, right, who enable the process in such a manner that the operating role can become smoother for a trustee.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, even it is not a real-time transaction requirement, right? It is important for the turnaround time to be smooth, right? In today's day and age, every party involved wants money movement. In the age of UPI, I think money movement now have to feel as seamless even in B2B, right? At least that's what we have seen as payment as a TA as well, right? But thanks, Althea. That clarifies, role of monitoring is operating and all kind of use cases where you see. Wanted to also request among these, if you guys have any specific questions, right, with respect to trustee, with respect to escrow account, with respect to what a TSP does, you can just put it on the chat and we'll take it up, right? And now talking about, you mentioned various categories of use cases, Althea, and some of these are actually regulated escrow use cases, right? So then coming to again a question that we get asked often, and a very pertinent question is, what is, the difference between a payment aggregator escrow? And Tushar, this question is to you, right? Between a payment aggregator escrow and, a non-PA or normal escrow, if I may put it that way, right? And what kind of use cases basically generally can get categorized. And this is super important, especially because, for example, we as a player are a payment aggregator, but we also act in the capacity of a TSP. So we sort of are also subject matter experts in this. So some light would be really helpful for the fintech community.
Thanks, Aditi. Very, very interesting question, right? So if you'll see payment aggregator escrow account that comes from PAPG guideline issued by CPI. The use case of PA escrow, as the industry calls it, is very straightforward, right? They are to facilitate e-commerce players or similar players, which we call merchant in our parlance, to make sale of their goods to the end customer. So in a PA escrow, funds from end customer comes in, they are to the PA escrow, and from PA escrow, the payment aggregator transfers it to the end merchant, right? This account is monitored by payment aggregator, and because reconciliation, checks, merchant and underwriting, everything is being done by payment aggregator, right? On the other hand, your normal escrow need not be operated by a payment aggregator one, and need not be to facilitate flow of fund from end user to a merchant. It can be between two peers, right? As Althea pointed out, right? A typical rent use case or a M&A use case, right? So in rent use case, the landlord wants timely payment and wants the money to be parked in location, and the tenant wants the security that, hey, look, even though I'm paying for 1 year, the property goes out of the market or is damaged, I should not be able to pay, but I'm still parking that money. So that is one use case. Or in a case of M&A deal, right, where the acquirer will not want to put entire money upfront to the acquiree company, right? Maybe to hedge a future liability, litigation, tax matter, etc. Right? So this is the typical difference, that in a PA escrow, fund flows straight, run by the payment aggregator, and the terms of contract is fairly simple: deliver the goods or services, get the payment. On the other hand, a typical escrow can have a little bit more nuances and can be between peers.
Got it, understood. So payment aggregator will be, regulated by a set of guidelines also in terms of how a merchant should be onboarded, etc. Right?
Correct.
So let's say if we as a payment company work in the capacity aggregator, we will be, under a certain set of guidelines. But as a TSP, we provide a similar set of services like reconciliation, etc., giving the ledger, pay in, payout, but money doesn't move through us, right? We are essentially, information movement is what is happening through us, and money movement is completely off us, basically, right? And that's depending on use case to use case, some of these can be enabled on one or the other, right? And those are kind of discussions that we can also have as a payment company, right, with our set of merchants and customers. I think we have a bunch of questions that have come in as well, so let's try to take a few of these. I think there's a question from Fussy. And this question I'll request Alya to answer. It's basically about the trustee monitoring role. So in a monitoring role of a trustee, should you find any discrepancies, how do you course correct, and what are the general turnaround times for resolution that you see as a trustee?
Yeah, so the question is that in a monitoring service, should you find any discrepancies, how do you course correct, and what are the general tasks for resolutions? So in a monitoring service, what happens is if there is any discrepancy, we immediately point it out. That is our role, that it has to be immediately pointed out to both the parties, that is the bank and the client. And generally, at least till now, we have not come across any discrepancy in the payments that have gone through. But yes, in case there is any such thing, it is we speak to the client, and they probably would speak to their merchant and get the money credited back into the account. This is how a normal monitoring arrangement would work.
Got it. And just as a follow-up to that, I think the other question about if there's a dispute between buyer seller, typically how does that get resolved course, there will be specifics on it, but at a high, if you could give some guidance on that as well.
So, this escrow agreement that is entered into between the parties also provides for any litigation, legal proceedings in case there is any dispute between the buyer and the seller. So, again, then to that extent, we would be bound by the what you call it, the litigation procedure that would follow. So, we would not be able to act on the instructions of only the buyer and the seller to that extent.
Got it, got it. So it's then super important to have watertight agreements in place where all of these are taken into account and taken into consideration in the agreement itself, right? Because fundamentally, the whole reason an escrow exists, right, is because there is a trust to some extent between the two parties, and also there is a milestone or a delivery or something that has to happen post which the money movement typically has to happen, right? So I think sort of also the answer, right, to how do you look at the dispute? It's whatever is given in the agreement will be followed, right? If something doesn't go the way it is expected to. We'll take a couple more questions as well. Tushar, this question is to you. I think the question is about some best practices that buyers and sellers should be aware when entering an escrow agreement.
Yeah. So there's no thumb rule to what can be the best practice, but what a buyer and seller should always look at is the terms of release and the terms of hold of fund should be as clear as possible. Always avoid vague languages, right? Like maybe. It should be very, very clear that if at end of month I am occupying the premises, and let's say example, right? I am occupying the premises, fund should get released rather than may get released, or with lots of ifs and buts. The more complicated you make a escrow agreement, the more troublesome it becomes for it to be enforced, right? And hence it's always necessary to keep the terms very, very clear. While there are other legal clauses like jurisdiction, etc., but they are not that material as having crystal clear clarity on what are the terms on which the funds are getting released and what are the terms on funds on which the funds are getting held. Others can be managed easily.
Great. Thanks. I think, Tushar, that really clarified. I think that's super important to keep things razor sharp, right? No ambiguity is the way to deal with it. There's one more question about if Cashfree provides escrow accounts, who would the escrow agent? I'll give my answer to it, and Tushar, please add on if there's anything there, right? So essentially, first of all, to clarify, when we say escrow accounts, cash flow is that of a technology service provider, right? The underlying account always belongs to the bank, right? And the role of an agent, it will be played by a trustee, right? To ensure that neutrality, there is process, there is compliance in place, right? So the role of Cashfree comes in the TSP. So for example, if you take the example of, let's say, our payout product, right? So experience you get a similar experience on your escrow because same sort of a ledger, same sort of a pay-in, payout, EI structure you get. But the experience is done in a manner in which the money movement doesn't happen via Cashfree. So that's sort of the underlying role of Cashfree, the TSP. Even in case of as a service, Cashfree's role will always be that of a TSP. Cashfree is not a bank, right? So its role is that of a TSP. Escrow agent is really a trustee, like universal trustees.
Correct, Aditi. It is very important to note that what we are doing is making things simpler, faster, and more efficient, right? We are not undertaking any regulated activity like opening the bank account, etc. We are facilitating and helping banks maintain these bank accounts, right?
Correct.
So, yeah, absolutely right.
Thanks, Tushar. There are a couple more questions. We'll try to get some more questions because I think that we are also clarifying questions that exist in people's, right? I think there are a couple of questions. How long the escrow process typically take from start to finish? What are the documents required to initiate and complete the process? How do escrow agents ensure the confidentiality and security of these documents? So I think the first one of us, I'll just give an overview of what the process is, right? The first step is if it is a physical escrow being opened for a platform, then the escrow account opening itself. If digital escrow, then it is about the signing of the agreements, right? signing of the agreement is one part of the turnaround time is important. So the faster that the parties can agree upon what need to be the set of policies, the faster the agreement closure can happen for the escrow, right? Then, of course, the necessary KYC is required to get the escrow opened. And then it's just a process of go live, right? So that's, it can, depending on the category of escrow, etc., it can go from, let's say, a week to a few weeks, right? Really depends on complexity of the use case as well. And key documents, but it again varies a little bit from use case to use case, but we have to take this line and discuss on a specific use case if we have any. The third question, again, Althea, I'll request you to answer because I think the question is about how you as an escrow agent, because you are the neutral party here, how do you ensure confidentiality of documents? This, I think, doesn't just mean onboarding documents, but whatever set of documents are provided between the parties, especially in financial transactions. I think it becomes super important, right? That security and confidentiality are kept intact. So if you'd like to take that answer, take that question.
So, as an escrow agent, basically, we have our own SFTP servers where access is given only to a few of our people. Not everybody has access to those that information, and whatever is shared also would is what you call accessible only on certain instruments. So, for example, like if I am accessing a particular, let's say, Cashfree's accounts, so and its clients, only my laptop would have access to it, and then that's it. There's nobody else, for instance. And as such, even as an escrow agent and as a trustee, we are bound to not share any information that is shared with us. Confidentiality has to be maintained to whatever extent applicable.
Got it. Got it. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think, for example, Universal Trustee is also a SEBI registered trustee, right? So there is a stamp of approval and trust from the fact that it's a SEBI approved trustee. If my understanding is wrong.
Yeah, so SEBI registration is in the process. We are not yet SEBI registered. We've applied for it. But again, even though we are not yet SEBI registered, we have to maintain all confidentiality in all respects.
Correct. Got it. Got it. Great. Good. Thanks. Thanks for the clarification and answering the question. There are a couple more questions I'll take. I think we are almost done with the time, but I'll just try to answer the questions. So one is, who typically bears the cost of the escrow service? I think that again depends on the agreement between the parties. And in some cases, the platform, if it's a platform like a fintech use case that Althea mentioned, it's a fintech typically who takes the cost. It's between two parties, the buyer, seller, you determine, right, who transaction charges. It's up to the parties involved, right? The other question on whether Cashfree is launching escrow services. Yes, we are launching escrow, which is our platform where we'll place TSP, we'll closely with escrow and the entire infrastructure to enable, easy apply for escrow. And there is one more thing that's my last, which is who is liable and by how much if the escrow goes bankrupt. So this is again an interesting question. Althea, in whatever capacity you can answer this, do you want to take it?
So even if the escrow agent does go bankrupt, the money that is in the accounts cannot be touched because that is not ours. That is not Cashfree's. That is yours, the clients. So we have no lien, we have no rights on the money or the whatever is in our custody as far as our services are concerned. So even if we do go bankrupt, you are not liable.
Thanks for the clarification, Althea. And Tushar, you have a point as well on that.
So what we have to really understand here is that the funds are not held by the trustee, escrow agent, the TSP like Cashfree, or the buyer or seller. The funds are held in a bank, right? So even if one of the parties go bankrupt, other parties in the ecosystem, in the deal, will work together to bring in a different party, right? So for example, if the escrow agent or the trustee, one of them, or the TSP, one of them go out of business, there is bank involved, there are so many people involved that the system will not go bust, right? They'll make sure another party comes in and takes their position and make sure the process is working smoothly, right? So your funds are held in a bank, safe and secure, and entire operations will also work smoothly because all other parties will make sure nothing falls apart.
Yeah, right. To
Go.
support even what Tushar has said, the agreement provides for termination also of this arrangement in case of
Yeah.
any, in case.
Got it. Got it. Okay, thanks. Thanks again. I think this really makes it very, very clear. And these are the kind of questions that come, right? So I always say that, like in case of other where lack of trust, a fringe, fringe, let's say, element. In case of escrow, that is the basis, right? It is about creation of trust. So these are very, very important questions that help, the attendee understand what the role of an escrow is. I think we've now come towards the end of time. We do have questions that have come in, but we're able to take those in the webinar, but we'll try to answer as many as we can on direct reach outs. Thanks so much. Thank you. Also, thanks, Tushar. I think short but super impactful and super sharp discussion, I think. I learned a lot and look forward to having more of these conversations.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
You were a great host, Aditi. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Sure.